The jungle was heavy with humidity and tension. Somewhere beyond the tree line, an American platoon waited, cut off, pinned down, and surrounded. Radios hissed with half sentences. The soldiers whispered rather than spoke. Each man could feel that something was coming. They just didn't know when. Back at base, a Marine sniper prepared quietly. His gear was simple: rifle, scope, a few rations, a canteen, and the patience of a man who had done this before. His orders were short: find the hidden enemy position that had the platoon trapped and help them escape. He didn't plan to march in. He planned to crawl. He left before dawn, sliding into the tall grass before the first light. The air smelled of rain and iron. Every sound mattered: the buzz of insects, the distant chop of helicopter blades, the faint rhythm of artillery far away. He had done this enough times to know that speed wasn't survival. Stillness was. He moved inches at a time, stopping when the wind paused, continuing only when the grass swayed again. Each movement had purpose. Hours became days. Sweat soaked his uniform. Dirt turned to paste on his skin. He couldn't risk brushing away the ants that crawled over his hands. The enemy was close enough to hear a breath. Through his scope, the world shrank to a circle. A fallen tree became a landmark. A single leaf twitching in the wind became a clock. He watched the enemy lines, patient and unblinking. Every few hours, he marked small changes: the way equipment shifted, where smoke rose, when someone moved from one position to another. Each detail built a picture in his mind, and slowly that picture formed the target he needed to find. When night fell, he stayed where he was. Moving in the dark was suicide. Light betrayed everything. Instead, he listened: the soft footsteps, whispered conversations, the metallic click of magazines being loaded. Information was his weapon. While he crept closer, the trapped American soldiers were fighting exhaustion. Supplies were low, the weather was turning, and the sense of isolation was breaking morale. The radio operator's voice cracked as he repeated the same call for assistance, not knowing that help was already crawling through the jungle toward them. Leaders tried to keep spirits up, telling stories, checking each man's gear, keeping movement quiet but organized. Hope was thin, but it was still there. They trusted that someone was out there trying to make the difference. By the second night, the sniper hadn't slept. Every joint ached. His lips were cracked. The jungle floor smelled of wet earth and decay. He couldn't risk lighting a match or opening a wrapper. Everything he did had to be silent. What kept him going wasn't orders. It was discipline. The kind drilled into Marines who understand that patience saves lives. Each small crawl forward meant one more piece of information, one more inch closer to ending the stalemate. When his body wanted to stop, he counted breaths. When doubt crept in, he reminded himself why he was there. By the third day, the outlines of the enemy emplacement were clear. He had mapped it mentally: where they moved, where they stored ammunition, the direction of their patrols. It wasn't just about taking action. It was about knowing exactly when to act. He radioed a coded update: short, controlled, factual. It reached command, and soon the trapped platoon received the same coded signal. Help was near. They didn't know how near, only that something had changed. Minutes later, coordinated support arrived. Artillery positioned correctly for the first time, air cover sweeping through a safer corridor. The stalemate broke. When the soldiers finally pulled back to safety, they expected to see a team behind the rescue. Instead, they saw one man returning from the tree line, face streaked with mud, uniform torn. He didn't wave. He just nodded once and headed for water and rest. No grand speech, no medal ceremony that day. Just quiet respect from those who realized how much he had endured. Reports later credited the success to intelligence gathered by a lone Marine sniper. Command described his patience and precision as textbook, though every Marine who heard the story knew it went beyond any manual. The mission became legend because it showed what training, calm, and self-control could accomplish even under impossible odds. It wasn't luck, it was focus. Years later, that story was retold in classrooms, training fields, and among soldiers heading out on their own uncertain missions. They didn't remember the humidity or the mud. They remembered what one person could do when everything depended on patience. When he returned to base, nobody clapped or cheered. The quiet of the jungle was replaced by the quiet of the barracks. He turned in his rifle, wrote a short report, and went to clean the mud out of his boots. That's what most people never see. The part after the headline. The moment when the adrenaline fades and the body suddenly remembers how tired it is. He poured a canteen of water over his hands and watched the dirt run down the drain. Every scrape on his knuckles told a piece of the story. To him, the mission wasn't about a record or recognition. It was about duty done right. A younger Marine passed him in the hall and stopped. "Sir, were you out there?" he asked. Hathcock just nodded. "What was it like?" the younger man asked. He thought for a moment before answering. "Quiet," he said, and kept walking. That single word traveled through the unit faster than any speech could have. Weeks later, commanders held a briefing for new snipers. They used his mission as a case study, not to glorify it, but to teach discipline and patience. On the chalkboard, instructors drew a long line representing time. "Most people think success happens here," one officer said, pointing to the end of the line. "But for this Marine, it happened here." He tapped the middle, the long stretch of waiting, watching, and deciding not to act until it was right. That idea reshaped how younger soldiers trained. They practiced slowing their breathing, learning terrain by scent and sound, and memorizing details that others ignored. It became known as the crawl doctrine, a nickname that meant doing the hard, unseen work that keeps others alive. When his deployment ended, Hathcock returned to the United States. Friends noticed he still walked lightly, as if the ground might give way. Crowds and bright lights made him restless, but he also found new purpose: teaching. At sniper school, he spent hours on the range explaining wind, distance, and patience. He told students, "The rifle's not the secret. The mind is." He never boasted about what he'd done. When students asked about the legendary mission, he deflected. "You'll have your own stories," he'd say. "Just make sure they end with everyone getting home." That humility made recruits listen even closer. They realized that real heroism wasn't about the moment of action. It was about the preparation that makes it possible. Years later, veterans from the rescued platoon gathered for a reunion. They talked about the jungle, the heat, the rain, the fear. One of them mentioned the mysterious sniper who had made their escape possible. "Did anyone ever meet him?" someone asked. A few nodded. One said, "He didn't say much, just asked if we'd made it out." They raised their glasses quietly. No speeches, no big toast, just a shared silence filled with gratitude. In that silence, they understood what he had endured for them. The military eventually wrote manuals using his experience as an example of situational awareness, mental control, and resilience. But his story spread far beyond the armed forces. Business leaders quoted him when talking about patience. Athletes studied his focus. Filmmakers referenced the long crawl as a symbol of perseverance under pressure. Each retelling changed small details, but the heart stayed the same. Sometimes the path to success is painfully slow, but it's the only one that works. In interviews near the end of his life, he was often asked how he found the strength to keep going. His answer was simple: you don't think about quitting when other people are counting on you. He talked about his love for the Marine Corps, for his country, and for the people beside him. He said the hardest part wasn't danger, it was waiting. Waiting demanded faith. Faith in training and teammates, in the belief that patience would pay off. That faith carried him through more than one mission. It carried him through life. Today, his story is part of Marine Corps history. New recruits hear his name during orientation, not as a legend to imitate, but as a reminder of professional calm. Instructors still tell them, courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, hold steady. On memorial walls and in museums, his picture hangs among others who embodied quiet excellence. Visitors often stop, read the short inscription, and walk away thinking about how much discipline one person can hold. For anyone watching this story today, the lesson goes beyond the battlefield. It's about doing the right thing even when no one sees, about trusting preparation when time runs out, and about staying composed when fear wants control. Whether it's in uniform or in everyday life, that kind of patience is rare. It's what turns ordinary people into examples others look up to. So when the world around you feels too loud or too fast, remember the Marine who moved 1 inch at a time through silence and changed everything because of it.